Standing Committee on the Status of Women. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the House Order of January 25th of this year. And the proceedings will be made available via the House of Commons website. I would like to make a few comments for the benefit of the witnesses. Today, our committee is continuing its study on midwifery services across Canada. If you're speaking, you're going to click on the microphone icon to activate your mic. A reminder that all comments should be addressed through the chair. And if you need interpretation, you look at the bottom of your screen. You can choose English, French, or the floor. And when speaking, please speak slowly and clearly so the interpreters can hear and interpret. And when you're not speaking, your mic should be on mute. So I'd like to welcome our witnesses. Each of you will have 5 minutes for your opening remarks, and then we'll go into our rounds of questions. We have Dr. Susan James with us tonight. We have from the Association of Ontario Midwives, Jasmine Texan, who is the president. And from McMaster University, we have Kirsty Beret, who is an adjunct scientist in the McMaster Midwifery Research Center. And so, Dr. James, we'll begin with you. You've got 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I've been the director of the School of Midwifery at Laurentian University for 20 years, and now, after a total of 22 years, the insolvency situation has caused me to be retired. I would like to focus on the role that the midwifery program has played in capacity building and then make some recommendations for going forward. First area, health human resources. The majority of current midwifery practices in Northern Ontario did not exist before the midwifery program began. As noted in the first session, 60% of the midwives practicing in these areas are graduates of the Laurentian program. Many students enter the program with the goal of joining existing Northern practices or setting up new ones. For example, Mélanie Guérin entered the program in 1999. And in response to a question about setting up a practice in her home community, Hearst, a Southern site director answered her, "There will never be practices in small communities like Hearst." This motivated Melanie to spend every visit home networking with community members, and in 2005, she set up her practice. Many Northern communities still have no midwifery and indeed no maternity services. There are many professional, provincial, and federal actions that will be needed to realize the dream that every pregnant person should be able to birth close to home. These include new funding models, transportation issues, clean water, and improvement of internet connections. A School of Midwifery in Northern University is a very useful strategy for informing the population about midwifery and about choices that can be made related to childbirth, childbearing, and other health situations. One example of something developed is that we created a pelvic teaching program in 2002 to train midwifery, medical, and nurse practitioner students and the hospital sexual assault nurses in sensitive, respectful, and informative pelvic examinations, including pap smears. This program may be lost with the closure of the school to the detriment of Northern residents. My next area is accessibility to education. Many of the Northern students and graduates of the Laurentian program tell us that they would not have done a degree in midwifery if they could not have remained in the North. Attention to the demographics of our applicant pool has led us to accept direct from high school applicants every year, which helps to retain students. The CNFS has assisted us with some resources for recruitment and scholarships for the program. The CNFS model is one that might be used for other aspects of a Northern site for midwifery education. Then my final area of capacity building is scholarship and research. Social science and humanities research about midwifery is common. There is a beginning collection of research by midwives to inform practice, but for the most part, this is not Northern oriented. Midwifery is a nearly invisible research profession, not included in lists of professions within granting agencies, nor calls for proposals and research teams. Federal funding for midwives to conduct research in low-income countries is available through the Canadian Association of Midwives. but similar opportunities for research in Canada's North are far less accessible. So my recommendations: the first, include health services in the responsibilities of FEDNOR. This may provide support for communities that can grow their economic picture when health services needed by residents of childbearing age are available locally. Second, build on the CNFS model to create federally supported but locally driven programs to address the needs of Northern Indigenous, Francophone, Anglophone, and racialized students. Third, support the development of a Northern Midwifery Research Institute, and possibly this could be in conjunction with the Center for Rural and Northern Health Research at Laurentian and Lakehead Universities. Fourth, support the reintroduction of a School of Midwifery in Northern Ontario. This continues to need the support to support the educational and practice needs of Northern Indigenous, racialized, Francophone, and Anglophone populations. And fifth, and perhaps for the federal government most important, establish an Office of Midwifery within the federal government to coordinate and liaise with other departments and professions on questions related to the profession and health issues related to reproductive and sexual health. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And now we'll go to Ms. Texan for 5 minutes. You're on mute. There you are.
Good evening, Madam Chair and committee members. My name is Jasmine Texan. I'm a registered midwife, and I speak to you today as the president of the Association of Ontario Midwives, the largest regional association of midwives in Canada. We are proud to be a part of a profession that is deeply valued by families, one that we believe is essential to improving health outcomes for pregnant people and their babies. Currently, there are approximately 1,000 midwives in Ontario, delivering about 18% of the babies in the province. We are autonomous primary care providers. Our midwifery education program, the first of its kind in Canada and respected internationally, confers a Bachelor of Health Science in Midwifery. Our comprehensive, rigorous training includes tests, commonly prescribed medications, care management of healthy, low-risk pregnancy and birth, and postpartum, as well as emergency skills and assessment and clinical care for healthy newborns. Our model of care has proven to be a highly successful method for delivering perinatal care. Strong clinical outcomes, exemplary client experiences, and efficiency in the delivery of evidence-based care. Our model incorporates the development of a working relationship as well as a trust relationship. The support for informed choice that comes from this leads to levels of client satisfaction that are outstanding for a profession, from 97 to 100%. High levels of client confidence and support, combined with continuity of care, lead to lower rates of interventions and shorter hospital stays. In 2019, the C-section rate for midwifery clients was 20%. In contrast, the provincial average was 29%. For midwifery clients who planned home births, the rate was an impressive 7%. By offering safe, skilled birth attendance at home or at birth centers and follow-up care postpartum in the community, Ontario midwives effectively reduce hospital admissions, further reducing healthcare costs and saving hospital resources for those who need it most. These facts clearly make the case that midwifery is worth investing in. Yet there is a price for midwives' dedication, even without the additional stress of frontline work during a global pandemic. Our profession suffers from underfunding of our education programs, discriminatory pay, and demanding work conditions that contribute to increasing burnout and the loss of skilled, dedicated professionals from attrition and disability. The closure of the midwifery education program at Laurentian is devastating to Canadian midwifery. 1/3 of the student midwives in Ontario were enrolled in the program. Its graduates have gone on to become leaders in regional midwifery associations across the country and in the National Aboriginal Council of Midwives. Closing the program ends bilingual midwifery education in Canada and essentially closes the door to Franco-Ontarians seeking midwifery education in their first language. The program made education accessible to a host of Indigenous and Northern students who otherwise would not have become midwives. The loss of this access point is a loss that will significantly impact the health of Indigenous and Northern communities. Now we have the risk of a reduced cohort of midwifery graduates who will care for tens of thousands of families in Ontario. The demand for midwifery across the province is great. Less graduates will mean families who choose midwifery care will be unable to access it, far more so in the north. In a 2015 analysis and report, the AOM made several recommendations for strengthening care in rural, remote, and northern communities. The Laurentian program prepared midwives to work in such areas across Canada. Among the recommendations included are that women should have access to high-quality maternity care as close to home as possible. Local perspectives and needs should be taken into account in healthcare planning. The right to self-determination and culturally safe care must be upheld in Indigenous communities. Training opportunities for new and experienced health providers need to be offered within these communities. Rural and remote midwifery funding frameworks must reflect the realities of practicing in these areas. With its integrated, person-centered approach throughout the provision of excellent perinatal care, midwifery is uniquely positioned to address social determinants of health such as gender, culture, race, and access to health services. Midwifery in Canada is growing, but it needs coordinated efforts in policy and funding from provincial and federal levels for sustainability. Thank you for your attention.
Excellent. And now we will go to Ms. Beret for 5 minutes.
Salut, cher. Dear committee members, Madam Chair, I represent the current concerns of Canadian Francophone communities outside of Quebec who feel targeted by the closure of the midwifery program. I'd like to thank the midwives, students, and Francophone clients who contributed to this testimony. I'm a Francophone midwife who was raised in Northern Ontario, and I hold an MEP diploma from Laurentian University. I've been a professor of the program since 2007, and I'm one of the only Francophone midwives outside of Quebec with a doctorate. Our key message is the following: to increase training of Francophone, Indigenous, and Northern midwives, including those who identify as Black or racialized, the profession must be better integrated into all levels of the public sector and healthcare policy and systems. The current closure of the MEP is due to governmental and educational decision makers' poor understanding of the profession of midwife. It provides the context for our recommendations at the federal level for increasing the impact of the profession across the country. Our recommendations are that the committee recommend the province re-establish the Northern Ontario Midwifery Education Program, that it include a French language stream, and that an Indigenous MEP be set up in Northern Ontario. At the federal level, we recommend, first of all, creating a chief administrator for midwifery at Public Health Agency Canada and inviting midwives to decision-making tables whenever doctors and nurses are also invited. 2, to invest in or create programs at the federal level that strengthen midwife training capacity for northern communities and francophones, and making these programs prioritize training for Indigenous and racialized students. Supporting midwives' capacity to do doctoral studies, to become educators and research so that they can generate data for the profession, and increasing the sustainability of this profession for the long run. The Laurentian University Midwifery Program has been more than successful in fulfilling its mandate. There is no more sound coming. I'll resume. Melanie Garin, who is a Laurentian graduate diplomate, says, the Hearst and Kapuskasing communities that I serve for more than 15 years are 95% Francophone. It's very unusual to have anybody come and settle in a northern community unless that person is from that community or a similar community. Pascal Alexandre, who is also a student at Laurentian University. I'm a Black woman, Black Francophone woman. I decided to become a midwife to support people in my community so that they can give birth in a safe cultural context. Eliminating the Francophone stream of the midwife program is an attack on minority Francophone groups, both Black and white, and on women who give birth. And in a context where it's proven that racial discrimination has a negative impact on health care, reducing access to racialized minority groups and linguistic minority groups is simply making the problem worse. Karine Chalut is a woman who has been attended to by a midwife in Eastern Ontario, where almost all graduates come from Laurentian University. I had the luck to have Francophone midwives for all three of my births. Having access to health services in her own language is not only an advantage, it's a must. When a woman is in a situation as vulnerable as giving birth, she shouldn't have to communicate in a foreign language or in a second language. This is dangerous. It's important that Francophone women continue to have access to services in the language of their choice. Although university teaching is a provincial jurisdiction, we believe that the federal government has a role to play in strengthening our professions and increasing its impact. There are currently federal government programs that strengthen healthcare professionals through education and research. For example, Health Canada has a Health in Official Languages program that finances the CNFS. Such programs could be implemented to boost midwife training in Francophone, Black, Indigenous, person of color, and Northern communities. In short, the federal government is able to innovate and create structures that demonstrate that investing in midwifery through leadership, training, and research would increase capacity and make an impact on our profession. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Merci beaucoup. And now we're going to start our first round of questions with Ms. Sahota for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for being here today and your testimonies. Ms. Texan, you spoke about the number of midwives that are registered in Ontario and the percentage of birth rate through midwives in Ontario. Do you know of any regional differences across Canada? And what are some of the factors that lead to these differences?
Unfortunately, the Association of Ontario Midwives doesn't collect data specifically for regions. What we have through our managed program with the Ontario Ministry of Health are registrations and with the college and funding via transfer payment agencies and registered practices. In terms of regional considerations, what we do know is that it's challenging to have midwives set up practices in rural, remote, and northern areas. Part of it is the concentration of midwives in urban centers in the southern parts of the province, facilities, and accessibility, quite frankly. So it is a driving concern to consciously monitor and maintain registration and practicing of midwives in those areas.
Ms. James or Ms. Bore, do you have anything to add to that?
I can add a little bit just to what Jasmine just said about the challenges of establishing practices in the North. This is a concern for the students right from the time they begin the program throughout their placements and when they graduate. Partially the funding model, which has added some wonderful improvements, but the funding model is basically a fee-for-service. So if you cannot generate enough clients for the midwife to make what would be an equivalent full-time salary or earnings in a southern placement or southern location, then it's quite possible that that midwife may not be able to stay there, particularly if she's a sole breadwinner for a family. Plus, she wouldn't necessarily have the ability to add in a second midwife to the practice to cover so they can have time off, they can take vacations, somebody could be ill. There is a locum program that can assist with that, but isn't always possible to assist at the last minute, to have somebody be able to say, I just need this weekend off, and have somebody to be able to cover a funding model where we would expect, like in schools in the north, where you have small classrooms, but the teachers are paid the same as a teacher in a large urban center with large classrooms, and in fact, sometimes even gets extra money for distance. So could it not be possible to develop funding models or supplements to funding models? So if the Ontario government funding model is not sufficient, is this a place where something like FedNor might be able to help out to assist with the economic components of having midwifery right across the province?
Ms. James, you spoke about like a midwife not being able to retain enough clients or have enough clients, and then having to maybe even move to another part of the country. Is mobility an issue? Is it fairly easy in terms of the rules around, you know, how you move and what you have to, what different criteria there are in different regions of the country?
At the basis of registration from one province to the next, there is an agreement that each province accepts the same registration exam, which is done at a national level. The competencies for midwives have been developed at a national level. There are some small additions that various jurisdictions have added to the requirement to get registered, but usually there's something that can be accomplished in writing a small examination or attending a workshop to add in the additional either competencies or knowledge of how the registration or regulations work in that particular area. So it is possible to move from one province to another, particularly once they can do that right from graduation, but particularly once a midwife has 1 year of experience, then cross province and into territories is not that difficult.
If I may add to the minister's question, while there are less barriers around education for midwives to practice to take their education credentials across the country, there are structural framework issues that need to be considered that can help or hinder a midwife's ability to set up shop. It's not simply a matter of moving to a location and hanging up a shingle. Depending on where a midwife would like to practice, there are issues such as how midwifery is located. There are not always autonomous primary care providers working independently in a self-employed model similar to Ontario. In other regions, they are employees that are part of a health service or a health center. There are also issues in terms of where
I'm sorry, that's your time on this question. We'll have to go now to Ms. Sahid for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks to all the witnesses for appearing before the committee today. Thanks for their time. My first question is for Dr. James. Dr. James, do you think that are there any opportunities for collaboration between the provincial and the federal governments that could potentially help your profession?
I certainly have wonderful expectations and aspirations that there can be opportunities for collaboration. I have sat in on federal meetings in the last few weeks since we lost our program, as well as provincial meetings. I've heard from representatives of, I think, every party, and I think everybody is talking about the same thing. It's a matter of making sure that there are ways that those collaborations can fit together, and some of them, I think, the reason why I think both Kirsty and I have mentioned the CNFS as perhaps a model is that we have seen it work well. We when it first came to Laurentian, it mainly was interested in nursing and social work and maybe phys ed, but over time we have also captured their interest, and we created a proposal a few years ago where our Francophone program would offer seats to students from other provinces where the other provinces would pay the grant part, and maybe the student would pay the tuition part, and they would be extra to our cohort of 30. And that we had provincial buy-in, we had federal buy-in, we had the individual potential student buy-in. And unfortunately, there was a change in the government at the time, and the CNFS, although the committee itself had found that we scored very highly on their priority list, and we thought we may be going ahead with that. The funding to CNFS that year got cut, and the program never actually happened. But I think that's an example of how the CNFS doesn't tread on provincial toes. It supplements provincial toes. And I think that we may be able to look at other possibilities for Indigenous students, for racialized students, for the North, that would have the same kind of structure that's a partnership between a post-secondary institution and the federal government, but with always the cooperation of the provinces to make it work.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. James. And one more question to you. As an autonomous and a primary healthcare provider, midwives are very essential to the healthcare services. So how do the midwifery programs and the role of the midwives shape the healthcare system in Canada?
Oh, that's a big question. So I think one of the first things that happened with midwives as well as nurse practitioners is that the ability for these two professions, and I'll refer mostly to midwives because that's what I know best, is that this was the first time that some professionals could work within the healthcare system as primary care providers, as autonomous, as with hospital admitting privileges in many provinces, able to prescribe medications, able to order investigations without having to necessarily have permission from any other profession. And it was a challenge within the healthcare system to see that we aren't doctors, and we don't have to have doctors for certain situations where the client fits within the scope of practice of the midwife, and the midwife then can carry on care without having to have permission that this client is able to come to a midwife, is able to stay with a midwife. The scope of practice for the midwife is to know when things are coming outside of her scope or his scope, and to move that client into potentially medical care, but it may also be into care of a social services provider. So we have created a partnership with physicians. We need them, they need us. And but it was a fairly significant challenge to the healthcare system to see healthcare providers who had that scope of practice, that level of responsibility, who weren't MDs.
Thank you. I think my time is up, or do I have some time? Okay. Just one quick question for Ms. Texan. Can you tell us a bit about equity and access to midwifery?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the last part of your question.
Can you tell us a bit about equity and access to midwifery?
So the Association of Ontario Midwives has prioritized as one of its strategic goals addressing equity within the profession with an awareness of racism, issues of a lack of diversity and equity in the bigger healthcare system. And so within the midwifery education program, that is also an area of specific focus. within how we work with our clients, especially in our informed choice model, we are able to spend more time with clients, an average of 30 minutes as opposed to the usual 5 minutes, which is the norm for a prenatal appointment. And we're able to get to know a client, to find out what is important for them culturally, individually, to provide the care that is most appropriate for their experience.
Merci beaucoup. Maintenant, Madame.
Thank you very much. Madame Larouche, you have 6 minutes. Go ahead, please. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to first thank our 3 witnesses, of course, for their much appreciated testimony. Ms. James, Ms. Texan, Ms. Bourret, thank you for being here to tell us about how important these programs are and about how important Laurentian University is. I would like to say as a Quebecer that we are in complete solidarity with Franco-Ontarians on this question. The Northern Ontario Francophone community truly deserves good services in French without being required to move elsewhere. And that includes good training services. You mentioned in your preliminary remarks how important it is to be able to speak in one's own language during a crucial health event such as giving birth. I have a question for you, but I just wanted to remind you that as a Bloc MP, that I try rather to point out that education and health, are provincial jurisdictions. These are how could we work together is one of my questions with the federal government. You've talked about this CNFS program. Dr. Borey, you could perhaps tell us more about this collaboration, how we can improve the midwifery situation in a context of collaboration between the provinces and the federal government. Answer. I think I'll let Susan James answer as well, simply because she's worked a great deal with CNFS. I think she'll really be able to give a full, in-depth answer on how to carry out this type of collaboration, a provincial federal one. The CNFS is a very, very important for healthcare providers. It is a program that provides subsidies and that works with provincial universities, but it's really for the benefit of all healthcare providers. At the very beginning, it was difficult for us to raise awareness of our profession at the federal level. We had to do quite a bit of education at the beginning. That's why we discussed the possibility, a bit of awareness raising at the CNFS through the creation of programs that would increase the number of Francophone midwives, but not just Francophone midwives. The CNFS is not there to increase the number of healthcare providers, but to increase the capacity. That is, to provide funding for researching on midwifery. As Dr. James says, we really have a shortfall in our profession when it comes to research. How can we explain the impact of midwifery if we can't study it and research on it? That's why CNFS is so important to us. Inaudible for the interpreter. The sound has been cut off. It's really a good collaboration, a good partnership that would allow us to explore midwifery and Francophone midwives. But I'd like Dr. James to further comment. Thank you.
I believe one of the ways that we have worked very effectively with CNFS as a federal organization and the university as a provincially funded organization is through wonderful communication and looking at where are the sources of funding for a particular request. So for example, if it was a student who was really struggling with something about a placement, and this comes up all the time, they have to move, they have to find a place to live, they have to buy food, they have to travel around, et cetera, and we do get provincial money to help with some of that. But sometimes a student will have additional needs. And if they're a Francophone student, they could ask CNFS if they have funding available to support that student. CNFS will first say, what have you already done? What have you already looked at? And then if that student still needs to have additional support, CNFS will then look at what is in their budget that can help. So we've seen that for financial support of students. We've seen that in the program. For example, recently we were looking for more textbooks in French. The challenge for professions right around the world is that most things get written in English, and we do want students to have the opportunity to learn by reading the required materials in their first language. And so we were able to get some funding and additional support from CNFS. So not only did they give us the money to make it happen, but they found the right people to do the translation. This was an electronic book, so we also needed really good IT support, but we needed people to do that IT support who were Francophone, who could understand what it was that we really needed for the Francophone students to really use that textbook well. They've
good.
also, yes, thank you.
That's our time on that question. Now we'll go to Ms. Matheson for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. One of the things that we've seen over the recent period of time is that there was for a long stretch quite a lot of supports for at least in Ontario for midwives and the Association of Midwives. There was stable funding. But that has been, as I understand it, been cut, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. But in addition to that, midwives worked extremely hard to win a historic landmark within the Ontario Human Rights Tribunal for pay equity, and that is now being appealed. So, if you could talk about the impacts that have on your members and the both financial, professional, and how that impacts your members.
I would say that the impact has been extremely discouraging for midwives. Midwifery has been legislated in Ontario for 27 years, and for 17 of those 27 years, midwifery compensation was frozen. So even for cost of living. And so to have a midwife with the clinical skills, emergency skills that we have, who are available on call 24/7 for our clients, it's, the disrespect is incredibly disheartening. To have that recognized by the Human Rights Tribunal of Ontario and the Divisional Court of Ontario was affirming, and yet it is deeply frustrating to have the provincial government challenge that, especially in light of the work that midwives have put in on the front lines, bridging care in the community so that families that are at a very vulnerable point in time can reduce their exposures during the pandemic. So to work as essential workers and yet not be recognized, has led to burnout. It frustrates midwives in that it has led to their compensation levels have led to them taking on higher caseloads than might be healthy. And that leading in turn to levels of mental or physical disability, which are a penalty on the entire profession. So thank you for your question, because I feel like this is an equity issue where the health of birthing people and the health of those care providers, particularly those who are marginalized, that health is threatened because of the undermining of the female predominant profession that serves them.
Thank you. We in this committee, we're at the same time, we're multi-functioning, doing a study about unpaid work and the additional work that women take on just naturally within care professions as women, and the imbalance that we see, or the unfairness that we see in terms of pay in those care professions. So it seems as though midwives are no exception, unfortunately, to that. But you had mentioned the additional stress because of COVID as well. And it's my understanding that because you were not recognized as essential services, you were not provided, midwives were not provided the pandemic pay, nor were they provided PPE. Can you talk about the impacts on your profession that way as well?
Yes, that's correct. So the federal government was good enough to provide funding for our province for pandemic pay. And unfortunately, in the divvying up of that pandemic pay, despite midwives meeting all of the criteria for essential workers who are eligible, midwives were not paid out because within the gender bias of policy setting, midwives were not included as an eligible category. So midwives consistently within the healthcare system are given, are treated as afterthoughts. And so the impact for midwifery practices was that they had to pay for additional staff, for changes to their facilities, for personal protective equipment for themselves and for their students out of their own operational budgets. For some practices, community members got together and sewed midwives' masks and made them gowns out of bed sheets. To have that happen for a healthcare profession that has gone above and beyond and pivoted to meet the needs of the community is incredibly disheartening. And midwives definitely felt the insult. It definitely added to the stress and burden of the pandemic, personally and professionally. I would say that...
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to say that, in terms of sustaining and growing midwifery cannot grow if it's stunted from the beginning by underfunding or outright cutting of its education programs. And further, it can't grow if it's starved by policies and compensation practices that don't value its workers. The treatment around pandemic pay is, entirely consistent with that.
You are obviously highly educated, and many of the students that I spoke to were very concerned that they couldn't continue their education if they were to switch to the other two universities, because they would be put onto a pass-fail type of situation. How does that also impact your profession when you're stunted? I mean, a bachelor is incredible, but when it stops there?
A quick answer in 20 seconds.
I would say that the cutting of the program, which was a success by all measures, is an example of what happens when decisions are made without consideration of the subtle impacts of gender bias. Ultimately, this slows the growth of a profession that already is growing slowly and is behind demand.
Very good. Now we'll go to Ms. Shin for 5 minutes.
Thank you. I'd like to thank all the witnesses today for providing us with some wonderful insights about midwifery, especially in Northern Ontario. I wonder if you could speak into midwifery and how it relates to Indigenous communities. So access to healthcare services may be challenging for many Indigenous communities, which may force Indigenous people to seek this care outside their communities. And they have reported experiences of racism and violence while seeking healthcare, including sexual and reproductive healthcare outside their communities. According to the National Aboriginal Council of Midwives, Indigenous midwifery care is a pathway that supports the regeneration of strong Indigenous families by bringing birth closer to home. I wonder if you could describe the role that Indigenous midwifery plays in the health and well-being of Indigenous peoples and communities. Or anyone there.
I suppose I can start, and Susan and Kirsty, perhaps you can chime in from working most directly with Indigenous students. my practice in downtown Toronto, even though I live in Scarborough, Ontario, is 7th generation midwives. And in how we work with an urban Indigenous population, but we work with a model that grounds care fundamentally within a family unit and centers that within the bigger community. And so for Indigenous families to receive care from an Indigenous midwife who shares their worldview, who shares their understanding of what is essential in consideration of their whole personhood, their health, and their location within their community, it makes a huge difference and minimizes the trauma that can be reenacted in their interactions within the healthcare system. It's affirming for the Indigenous midwives practicing, and as well, definitely for the families, and resets the harm that has been caused generationally, thanks to residential schools. Perhaps Kirsten or Susan would like to add more.
In the midwifery program at all 3 sites, we've, right from the beginning in 1993, have felt it was important to ensure that Indigenous applicants had an opportunity to have a space within the program. At Laurentian, we have generally had a cohort of Indigenous students in every year of the intake of our program, and we attempt to not only support what it is that they feel they need from us to prepare them for practice in their communities, but we also want the other students who will be practicing in Northern Ontario, likely with at least some Indigenous clients, and some practices will have high proportions of Indigenous clients, will have an understanding so that each client doesn't have to try and interpret what does it mean to be Indigenous to every midwife that she encounters in her healthcare. Ideally, of course, we would like for our Indigenous students to have an opportunity to have all of their placements in Indigenous practices. And we do have procedures set up in our placement process to at least give them the first opportunity to get those placements when they are available. We also know that the times are changing, and it is time for there to be Indigenous schools of midwifery. And we know that there is federal funding being put in place through FEWO for the students to be able to create a school that is an Indigenous school. One of the things that may happen with a new Northern School of Midwifery, instead of just recreating the northern site of the consortium, perhaps we may have a new consortium that's something similar to what we have, but our partners might be maybe 2 or 3 Indigenous schools of midwifery in Northern Ontario. Maybe our partners will be with other places where Francophone students want to study. So I'm getting off the Indigenous topic here.
But nous allons maintenant à Monsieur Serret pour 5 minutes.
Mr. Serret, you have 5 minutes for questions. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to our witnesses for their testimony. A quick question to all 3 of you, and you'll understand why I'm going in this direction. One of our previous witnesses was part of the Tri-Council. Dr. James.
Council at all? Just quickly, please. And then I'll pass it on to...
I only heard the first half of what you said, and then it was a blank, and then Dr. James. Whoops.
So Dr. James, were you part of the Tri-Council? We heard from Lisa Morgan. She participated in meetings at the Tri-Council. I just want to know, yes or no, like, were you part of that? And I'll tell you why after.
Okay, I am a member of the, if you were talking about the Tri-Council, the way that it got
McMaster, yeah,
McMaster,
and
Ryerson, and yes, I was the director for 20 years. I participated in many, many meetings of that consortium.
Correct. Mrs. Tuxen, are you part of that Tri-Council?
I am not a member because of the consortium. However, I was a member of the advisory council of the consortium when I was
the advisory. Okay.
So the consortium members are leaders within the midwifery education.
Okay. The consortium. Excellent. Madame Barnett, were you part of the Tri-Council?
Madame Bourret, oui, j'ai été depuis.
Yes, since 2007, because I was a professor at Laurentian. Do the McMaster students go up north to Nunavut, New Brunswick? Does McMaster send students across Canada? Answer: I can't give you statistics. It's just we have an idea of where our students go, and once graduates, and I'd say that yes, Francophones. We have Francophones from Manitoba, Alberta, New Brunswick.
Right now, the Laurentian blew up the program. No Francophones are getting services in September. Aboriginals are not going to get much service in September. Rural is blown up. It's dead. It's gone. And so I'm trying to figure out, because I know we're talking about the federal government's role, and I know we got the Tri-Council here that is not submitting, or submitting proposals to the provincial government. Madame James, you talked about the CNSF, and they do marvelous work. But they haven't proposed anything back to the federal government. I dealt with la francophonie, Communauté Fédération francophone et acadienne, l'Association des collèges et universités de la francophonie canadienne, la Société nationale de la santé. These are all organizations, and so my question to Ms. Tuxen is, how do we try and coordinate a plan? Right now, there's the provincial government has zero plan for midwifery, other than just giving it to McMaster and Ryerson. How do we try and coordinate our efforts? And this is, thank Lindsay Matheson for bringing this motion forward here. How do we try and coordinate efforts to get a plan so that we could have the federal government at the table with proposals? Right now, there has been no proposals submitted. So I wanted to see if you could help us to try and steer us in the right direction here with some recommendations to the federal government.
I would say as a starting point, it would be valuable to reach out to the Ministry of Health, which manages the Ontario Midwifery Program, and to the Ministry of Colleges and Universities in Ontario, and to work with them to develop a cohesive plan that looks long-term. So it helps at the federal level to have midwifery recognized, even as a job category, because it's not. And so, if the federal government starts with a clear position on midwifery and goals and targets for how they would see midwifery positioned to support birthing people across Canada, that vision can translate down as an expectation to provincial governments for setting their policies and programs.
Dr. James, you mentioned earlier, you were at the table with the CNFS, you were at the table with the provincial government, the Wynne government prior. They were making some movement. Now it's gone. So I'm trying to get a handle here on understanding if we don't have a willing provincial partner at the table, how do we get together? We have to get the provincial government to outline there's an issue. And I know it's difficult right now with the court situation, Laurentian. The court has made it, worst case scenario. But how do we get sitting down with provincial government?
I hate to interrupt before the answer. Yes. Maintenant, Madame Larouche, 2.5.
Madame Larouche, you have 2.5 minutes. Thank you, Madam Chair. Once again, thanks to our 3 witnesses. I'll try to be quick. Ms. Bourret, I'd like to come back to the closure of the program. If the registration rate, now just correct me, 30 places for 300 applications, why did the program close? Why has the program closed, in your opinion? answer. I think the answers are the same. It's just a lack of awareness with regard to midwifery, the role of midwives in Canada, and the province's role. I think if Laurentian University had an understanding of the impact of midwives in Canadian society, Laurentian would have had trouble closing this program. Generally, we're considered to be less important because we're a female profession. But let me go back to Mark Serre's question. At the federal level, you need to examine not only how you can help the provinces, but how to, unfortunately, the sound is inaudible. How can the federal government also reinforce the role of midwives around the whole world? There has to be some sort of administrative role. We need to have a federal chief midwifery officer. There's all kinds of innovations that are funded by Global Affairs Canada around the world, but that are not funded here on Canadian territory. That doesn't make sense. We should be able to innovate federally here in Canada to integrate the position of midwifery into our society. And then that would trickle down to the provinces. That's all.
Go to Miss Matheson for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you. One of the things that the Canadian government has a responsibility to do is to enforce the Canada Health Act. And within that, of course, is reproductive services available to women across Canada equally and fairly. And certainly the role of midwives has the ability to expand. And I know that, for example, in Hamilton, Ontario, they are working with other doctors, ensuring that they have medications available so that women who need access to reproductive services can get them. Can one of you, all of you, talk about quickly the role of expanding that role of midwives to ensure that women have that equal access under the Canada Health Act to reproductive services and health services?
I have to jump in to speak here because this is an area of interest of mine. And it's important to point out that it actually isn't an expansion of our role. In Ontario, it is. But when you look at our global definition of midwifery, we have within our scope to provide all sexual and reproductive health care, which includes contraception, which includes access to abortion. So this is something that's well known and that we are trained to do. And again, around the world, I'm working with Global Affairs Canada to ensure that midwives have the capacity to do this within their scope, which means increasing access to sexual and reproductive health care, especially in very, very remote and rural areas, and which is something that we've been arguing for a really long time. So while in Ontario it might look like an expanded scope, really the vision of midwifery at the national level is to be able to provide these services across Canada. And, this is going to have actually a huge impact on our ability to impact this issue around our overall lack of access to contraceptive and reproductive health care, especially with Indigenous and other populations that are at a disadvantage. So I think there is an opportunity here to have this discussion. And again, to raise awareness around that midwife's capacity to function in that way.
Very good. And I think we'll leave it there. I want to thank our witnesses for your excellent testimony, for helping us with our study. We're going to suspend briefly while we do sound checks on our next panel. Witnesses for our second panel here on our study of midwifery services across Canada. From the Canadian Association for Midwifery Education, we have Kim Campbell, who is the chair, not the former Prime Minister, but an expert in her field. And also we have from the Canadian Association of Midwives, Alexandra Bacon, who is the president. And each of you will have 5 minutes to make your remarks, and we'll start with Ms. Campbell for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. So I wish to thank you for the opportunity today, thank you, Madam Chair, to provide evidence regarding the midwifery and the impact of the Laurentian University program closure through an education lens. I'm representing the Canadian Association for Midwifery Education, as we said, which is a not-for-profit organization of midwifery educators. Our mission is to promote excellence in midwifery education, and we do this through setting and maintaining standards for curricula.
Madame la Présidente, je suis désolée, point d'ordre. Désolée, Madame Campbell, mais je n'entends pas.
I'm sorry, Ms. Campbell. There's no interpretation. This is a point of order. And the interpreter would just like to say that the sound is not sufficient.
Close to your mouth, Ms. Campbell, and we'll do another sound check.
Okay, testing. Can you hear me okay? Try.
I'm sorry that the sound is still not sufficient. There seems to be some sort of problem with sound transmission.
Because it's making it more distorted, so we'll try the best we can, and we'll let you know if we have to interrupt.
So
please
should
resume.
I try again? I'm sorry.
No problem.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm going ahead here. So I just wanted to tell you that we are the accrediting agency for midwifery education, and one of our goals is to maintain the standards of curriculum and scholarship, as well as supporting continuing development of midwifery faculty and programs. And currently, we're also exploring the ways in which we can support the Indigenous midwifery education programs that currently exist and are being developed. So before Laurentian's closure last month, Canada had 7 baccalaureate midwifery education programs in 5 provinces. Combined, they admitted just over 150 individuals into a highly competitive stream each year, where approximately about 10% of all applicants are given an offer of admission. Upon graduation, these new midwives will have spent over 2,500 hours in supervised clinical practice and exit the education program ready to provide primary care, meeting the sexual and reproductive health care needs of women, trans, and non-binary people. Midwifery is the international standard supported by the World Health Organization for primary maternity care. Professional midwifery is the most cost-effective primary maternity care for healthcare payers, and 85% of pregnant people can complete their pregnancy and birth safely with only midwifery care. We have an obstetrical primary care provider crisis in many communities across Canada, and midwives see themselves well prepared to fill this need. As you know, I think you probably heard that midwives attend about 20% of the births in Ontario per year and 26% of births in British Columbia. Those are the two largest midwifery represented provinces. And the loss of a program threatens the production of enough midwives to replace midwifery retirement or those promoted into leadership work. Ontario also educates midwives for the provinces and territories without sufficient midwives in practice to have their own educational programs, such as Atlantic Canada and the far north. And that need, combined with educating midwives for Ontario, cannot be managed by two midwifery programs in the south. We must also highlight we lack sufficient midwifery providers who represent the diversity of our communities across the country. Birth is a psychosocial health event that proceeds most normally when the culture of the primary provider matches that of the birthing family. Therefore, diverse provider backgrounds, including Indigenous and French-speaking midwives, are essential to culturally safe care. Students should be able to study midwifery close to their home communities. Having students move south to large urban centers for midwifery education places an unnecessary burden on families when they plan to live and work in the north. And students may learn and perform less well when separated from their community supports, and program attrition is linked to such barriers and stressors. As a collective, the midwifery education program has recognized the urgent need to address inequities and facilitate diversity within our programs to support a safe and inclusive environment for Indigenous, Black, and people of color within the student cohorts. We also know that the populations that suffer Canada's highest perinatal morbidity and mortality are found in our northern Indigenous and racialized communities. And when there are insufficient maternity community obstetrical services, the birthing units close. Pregnant people must travel, sometimes significant distances, to receive care, and this intersects with multiple social determinants of health. Researchers from the University of British Columbia have reported that negative impact on birth outcomes when obstetrical services close and people must travel from their communities to give birth. Several universities are instituting processes to remove barriers for Indigenous applicants and others to join midwifery education programs. Education programs that reduce barriers to enable inclusivity of folk who, due to racism and colonization, have experienced systemic trauma, violence, and oppression, is essential to support equity underserved population. Closing Laurentian University's midwifery program, that program that helped meet those gaps, imperils those communities. I also need to stress that midwives continue to struggle for recognition, and it is exhausting to continue to have to do so. At the federal level, there are barriers to midwives, notwithstanding the long Indigenous and settler history of midwives' roles in Canadian history. The first new midwifery wasn't regulated in Ontario until 1994. Now that's 27 years later. Midwifery is regulated or is in the process of being regulated in all provinces and territories in Canada. And in the current healthcare climate, there is pressing need to support capacity building. Midwives should have pathways to leadership and service at the federal level. Unfortunately, there's a lack of access to research awards and representation at the table where policy is forged. Many midwives will graduate from a 4-year degree with a burden debt of about $90,000 to $100,000. However, if they work in rural and remote communities, they do not benefit from the federal education loan forgiveness programs of their colleagues in nursing and medicine enjoy. Midwifery is a gendered profession, and we serve a gendered population. Laurentian provided education to future midwives who serve Indigenous, Francophone, and northern and remote communities. It's been said by others that you can assess the health of a nation by how it treats its Indigenous peoples. Limiting the education of health professionals who are can ably serve these communities does not reflect very well on us. Thank you very much for the time to allow me to speak to you today.
Thank you so much. And now we'll go to Ms. Bacon for 5 minutes. You're on mute still.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Canadian Association of Midwives and the National Aboriginal Council of Midwives are the organizations representing midwifery in Canada. Our vision, equitable access to excellent sexual, reproductive, and newborn midwifery services for everyone. Our focus to achieve this is on advocacy, midwifery association strengthening in Canada and abroad, and promoting excellence in clinical care. Midwives are involved in 11% of the births in Canada and play a vital role in the provision of equitable, accessible, culturally safe, and high-quality healthcare when and where people need it the most. Evidence shows midwives working in the continuity of care model decrease preterm birth, stillbirth, epidural use, and instrumental birth. Canadian midwives also decrease rates of cesarean birth, hospital admission and readmission, and shorten hospital stays. All of this saves the system money. For birthers of low socioeconomic status, midwifery has been shown to reduce the prevalence of small for gestational age and preterm birth when compared with physician care. Similarly, Canadian evidence shows birthers who are substance using or who have mental illness also experience improved outcomes when cared for by midwives. But access to midwifery care is constrained by a lack of awareness. We know, as Kim has mentioned, there's an inverse relationship between perinatal outcomes and distance traveled to care. Canadian midwives, however, have a long history of providing care closer to home, particularly in Inuit, Indigenous, and remote communities. The UNFPA State of the World Midwifery Report was released on May 5th, International Day of the Midwife. For the first time, it includes a Canadian report showing our workforce of 2,000 midwives amounts to only 0.5 midwives per 10,000 individuals. This is an inverted ratio of midwives to physicians compared to most high-income countries, and indeed most other countries in the world. Our sexual, reproductive, maternal, and newborn child health workforce theoretically may exceed need. However, in reality, many communities do not have their needs met due to inequitable distribution of providers, as well as scope of practice restrictions. The report also points to a potentially inefficient skill mix within the workforce, which may contribute to over-medicalization of childbirth or too much too soon in urban areas, and too little too late in rural, each contributing to higher costs to the system and poorer outcomes for Canadians. Given the improved outcomes and cost savings, the case for increasing the proportion of midwives involved in birth is sound. However, if Canada wanted to adopt a midwife-led perinatal care system, we would need to increase the number of midwives to 9,000 by 2030. What the State of the World Midwifery Report doesn't take into consideration is the factors that threaten the future of the midwifery workforce in Canada. These include, as have been mentioned by previous witnesses, a shortage of midwives to meet the demands of Canadian birthers, a failure to address the needs of Indigenous midwifery and fulfill the TRC call to action number 23. Gender discrimination, manifesting as a scarcity of midwifery leadership in administration and governance, inequitable pay, lack of provincial or territorial funding, a stagnation of growth in some jurisdictions due to health system arrangements and or a lack of professional autonomy. And these culminate ultimately to result in significant levels of burnout for the midwifery profession. The closure of the Laurentian University MEP, Canada's only bilingual and tricultural MEP, further threatens the stability, diversity, and equity of our workforce. We call upon the federal governments to cooperate with provincial and territorial to support the relocation of the Laurentian program to a northern university which can support its bilingual and tricultural mandate, expand investment in Indigenous midwifery, and focus on creating diverse pathways to education, including community-based education for Indigenous students, extend federal student loan forgiveness to midwives working in underserved rural and remote communities, add midwifery as a primary healthcare provider as defined by the Treasury Board of Canada to facilitate midwives' eligibility to work in federal service jurisdictions, create senior midwifery leadership positions, including a chief midwifery officer within Health Canada, and to invest in CAM's capacity building work with Canadian midwifery associations, as well as investing in midwifery research and advanced education and leadership training for midwives. Thank you.
Excellent, excellent. Now we're going to start into our rounds of questioning with Ms. Shin for 6 minutes.
Thank you. I'd like to thank the witnesses in this panel for sharing their information and giving us more insight and understanding of midwifery in Canada. Alex, you mentioned 11% of births in Canada involve midwives. And I like the terms, just to quote you, culturally safe healthcare and improved outcomes. I'd love to hear a testimony from both witnesses on any situations that you were directly involved in or that you're aware of, scenarios where culturally safe healthcare in the context of the work of midwives really did improve the outcome. Maybe an example in the Indigenous community and another example in the racialized community.
I can speak to a somewhat sad example. In my practice, very recently, we had an Indigenous birth giver, and she was pregnant with her 5th child. She had had 2 previous losses. Her eldest child was severely disabled and required 24/7 care in a wheelchair with a feeding tube. And she found herself in the very sad circumstance of experiencing another 2nd trimester loss at 18 weeks. And it was what we call a missed miscarriage. She had to be induced to prevent complications associated with this. And it was extremely important to her that she received care that was holistic and as well as culturally sensitive. So what this looked like was I connected with an Indigenous doula to ensure she could have culturally competent support. I looped in spiritual care to better understand her requests. For example, she wanted a cedar wrapping of the baby as part of a ceremonial burial. So we coordinated to ensure that would occur. We connected to make sure that she would have childcare, so she and her partner could be together for the birth of their child, while their eldest and their other children could be well taken care of. And we helped to facilitate a traditional burial with an elder from her community. So that would be my example. I don't know, Kim, if you'd like to share one.
I have one that's more uplifting, but not maybe not as impactful as what you had happen, Alex. I work in a community birth program in Surrey, which serves new Canadians, a large immigrant population. And we had access to translation services through the Fraser Health Authority. And we had many people who could not speak English as a first language or very little English at all. This one particular person had come from an African nation that spoke French, and I didn't speak any French, but we were able to get an interpreter for them, and we got a community member who became a doula and provided doula services to them. We did absolutely everything. We fulfilled all of her wishes. She came from a traumatic background. She had come from a country that had experienced war and violence, and she was exceptionally traumatized. She had PTSD, and we facilitated a beautiful, spontaneous birth because we set the stage for what she needed.
Thank you so much. I really love the sense of dignity that you're bringing through these very specialized forms of care. My question now has to do with COVID-19 and how it has impacted midwives, and if in fact it has, how it's impacted maybe hospital births versus births in the homes of the pregnant mothers. For both witnesses, maybe you can start with Alex.
Thank you so much for your question. I think that midwives have really stepped up in the time of COVID-19 to sustain their services, but also to offer new services and to offer advocacy for birthing people to receive respectful care and the support that they need. So to give you an example, at times in the pandemic, there were birthing people who were denied the presence of a support person in labor, and midwives advocated to ensure that the birthing people could have the appropriate support, which we know the evidence supports in terms of reducing rates of cesarean birth and other interventions. So in my place of work, people can bring in their partner, they can bring in a certified doula. We are masked, though the birthers aren't necessarily wearing masks when they're pushing. They're not able to bring their families in to visit them anymore, though afterwards, or extended family are no longer able to be present for the birth. There has been in certain jurisdictions restrictions on home birth that were made very hastily, and I'm very pleased to say that the midwifery leadership advocated strongly for home birth to be reinstated. As I believe Ms. Texan alluded to earlier, one of the strengths of midwifery during this pandemic has been that we offer care out of hospital, which relieves the pressure on acute care settings, as well as keeping healthy people away from sick people in acute care settings. Midwives have also expanded their offerings to offer COVID testing and COVID immunizations, and to provide care for those who found themselves unattached to their primary care provider, because at the beginning of the pandemic, many family physicians closed their practices, and midwives, we didn't have that luxury of waiting to figure things out. We hit the road and we ensured that people continued to receive the care that they required.
Very good. And now we'll go to Ms. Dillon for 6 minutes.
Do you mean?
Thank you. Sorry? Okay. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I'll start with Ms. Bacon. You had a very heartbreaking story about what can sometimes happen. I'd like to ask you, following the closure of the midwifery program at Laurentian University, there will be a disproportionate impact on Indigenous students, and what are the consequences of a decrease in the number of Indigenous midwives across Canada, in your opinion?
Thank you for your question. We cannot afford to have a decrease in Indigenous midwifery. In fact, we need to be focusing all of our investment on growing the workforce of Indigenous healthcare providers to fulfill our Truth and Reconciliation Commission and UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. This will be devastating. We've seen Joyce Echuan, and we're hearing the call for Joyce's principles out in British Columbia, where I'm located. You know, we've recently looked at the Impact in Plain Sight report. The impact of racism is devastating on Indigenous families, and it's unacceptable. We can not afford to lose any of our Indigenous midwifery practitioners. In fact, at this time, we need to be funding and innovating so that we can increase the number of Indigenous midwives available to provide culturally safe care where and when it's needed.
Thank you very much. And Ms. Campbell, would you like to add something to that?
I agree with Alex, and there's so many examples that I can recount of where my lack of understanding and knowledge of their culture and their community has had such a detrimental effect, I think, and not being able to meet their needs. And that's not just Indigenous people, but many people. So I think we need to increase diversity in all areas, and Indigenous, absolutely, hands down, agree with Alex.
Thank you. And I'd like to ask you, Ms. Campbell, how many bilingual midwifery programs are offered in Canada? And what is the number of student applicants in comparison to the space that is offered for these programs? Thank you.
Well, right now there's only one program in Canada that offers French language instruction, and you have to be a resident of Quebec to attend it. It's at the University of Trois-Rivières at Quebec, and it's Sherbrooke rather, and it's limited to people who live in that province. So with the closure of Laurentian, there is no other Francophone instruction available. And the second part of your question was?
And what is the number of spaces that are available to those who are applying to these positions?
They have 24 seats a year at UQTR. That they admit to, and they would all be French-speaking people. And those would be the only seats available in Canada for French language instruction for those people living in Quebec.
Okay, so you believe there is a serious need for more spaces and more.
We have yes, but we have a bit of a dilemma right now. Alex spoke a bit about the burnout that midwives are experiencing. COVID has certainly contributed to that, but lack of pay equity and resources have also had a significant impact on the workload that midwives have been experiencing. And you need preceptors to train midwives. I mentioned there's 2,500 hours of clinical time spent in the midwifery program where students are placed with midwives and providers to learn how to practice, just like medicine and nursing does. And when we have burnt out midwives. They're not able to find the energy and the time to teach. And we've experienced a significant drop in our preceptors in BC, and I know that has been felt in Ontario, that has been felt in Alberta, and has been reported in Quebec. We have significant issues with preceptor burnout. We need more midwives, but the University of British Columbia was offered an expansion to our program, and we had to say that we couldn't at yet this time bring more students in because we couldn't place them.
My God. Okay. Ms. Bacon, I have a question for you. You've done considerable work in sexual health education. Can you share with us how midwifery services support the provision of sexual and reproductive health care in Canada?
Thank you so much. So this is an area where midwifery is greatly underutilized, as Dr. Bourret alluded to earlier. It is within the scope of a midwife to provide cervical cancer screening, to be providing contraception, including the placement of intrauterine devices and the new Implanon contraceptive insert. It's in our scope of practice to be testing and treating for sexually transmitted and bloodborne infections. However, in some jurisdictions, this is with an advanced scope, like an advanced training, and it is not accepted in all jurisdictions. There are also constraints in that we are limited to providing this care in most cases, though not all, to people who are pregnant or in the first 3 months postpartum. This is an area where midwives could be providing a much larger role and having a bigger impact in helping to meet that unmet need for contraception in Canada, the unmet need for long-acting reversible contraception in particular, and that culturally safe component of care. There are pilot projects in Ontario in particular, such as the MATCH program in Ontario, where midwives are working with delegation of function to be able to provide these services to people outside of that childbearing year, as well as to provide abortion services. So these are areas where we can expand.
C'est la fin de votre temps. Alors maintenant,
Madame Larouche, you have 6 minutes. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you very much, Ms. Campbell and Ms. Bacon, for being here with you and for reminding us, and for reminding us of the crucial role that midwives play in reproductive health. I'm glad you mentioned the role of the university, the Laurentian University program, working with Francophones, Indigenous people, Northern communities. You've mentioned that these birthers need to be served in their own language, and that program is so important for them, was so important for them. Ms. Campbell, you spoke about the underpayment of midwives. Ms. Bacon, you've talked about underfunding of the health care system and the low wages. You also talked about investing more in midwifery associations. Ms. Campbell, you talked about the lack of resources. The pandemic has made these problems worse, you said. Midwives are exhausted. Healthcare workers are exhausted. It's important then that the government reinvest in healthcare transfers to allow Quebec and the provinces to be able to, in turn, reinvest in the healthcare systems. I'd like to hear you on the importance of having a vision in healthcare, of giving money immediately rather than waiting for a crisis, to give money to midwives and other underpaid professions.
Look, Madame Campbell, Madame Bacon.
Ms. Campbell, Ms. Bacon, either one of you could begin, perhaps Ms. Campbell and Ms. Bacon after. Both of you spoke of underfunding rather.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. Yes, there are several initiatives that could be undertaken if scope of practice was enhanced to help actually make better use of the funding that we have. Right now, we have siloed healthcare systems where midwives who have capacity to provide a more comprehensive service could be bulked into a team delivery system, for example, where the funds would Actually, you may not have to find more money, just be more creative in the use of the monies that you have. But we have right now a bit of a double dipping system where we have to refer to other providers to duplicate care when we actually have the competency and the skills to do it. And it costs consumers money for that. I think that if there was leadership in midwifery in leadership positions, they could have the potential to bring that lens to the discussion. But we can't even at this time be at the table for some of these discussions because we're not recognized.
So I'd like to build on what Kim has to say to talk about the importance of not only fair compensation of midwives, but integration of midwifery into the healthcare system. Otherwise, we will see situations like we see in some of the provinces and territories that are using the employment model where there's a complete stagnation in growth. We are asking impossible things. There are provinces, territories where there are 4 midwives. Those midwives are expected to practice clinically, to represent midwifery in regulation, in association, at all of the committees and research. It's an unacceptable burden to put on a small group of healthcare providers. Canadian Association of Midwives has identified as one of our 3 key pillars focusing our efforts on strengthening midwifery professional associations. We've had huge success with this in being able to impact the health, rights, and well-being of women and girls in our association strengthening work abroad. But we do not have the funding currently to provide those same supports to see midwifery integrated and midwives in positions of leadership here at home in Canada. So we would like to see a partnership where midwifery capacity building for the associations in the various provinces and territories, as well as the National Aboriginal Council of Midwives, was provided to do that capacity building and create a more sustainable system.
Tout à fait. Donc, Madame Campbell.
Indeed. Ms. Campbell, I have another question for you. You talked about the importance of the Laurentian program. We need to ensure that there is a new generation of midwives in Indigenous communities, Francophones communities, and so on. I'd like to hear you talking then about ensuring that we have this next generation of midwives.
We believe that perhaps the best way to deliver an education program that reduces the barriers for participation needs to be it needs to be distributed to their communities. So we're trying it in British Columbia. We're distributing programs to other communities so that the students are coming together as a cohort to learn in small periods of time, but then they're actually going back to their home communities or communities close to where they are normally living and continue their education there. We know that when we educate people in those communities, they stay in those communities. And when we bring people out into the South, they sometimes don't go back, or they can't succeed in the program because they have lost the support of their family. We've had an Indigenous student come into our program many years ago that experienced so much trauma and grief from the social effects of social determinants of health that it was just overwhelming for her to be able to stay in. Had we been able to be more flexible in our program and offer something that was more unique to meet their needs, it would have been a different outcome. I think there's so many different things we could be doing better.
Now we'll go to Miss Matheson for 6 minutes.
Thank you so much. You both spoke about specific stories that you had heard or that you had seen directly from a lot of your clients. And when we talk about vulnerable populations, it has so much in terms of degree of what that could mean. And I think that a lot of women, it could be for religious purposes as well, cultural, they don't have trust in the system. They don't want to enter an institution like a hospital. Could you talk about what the difference? And obviously, when midwives enter a home, that's a very different type of service. Can you talk about the importance of when a group, a culture are so impacted by that institutional reality that doesn't fit with what the birthers need?
Can I go first, Alex? I think I'll take that on. I serve a population of in the Fraser Valley that have deep religious beliefs, and some of them is a non-interventional approach, and they choose to birth at home, and because of their strong beliefs, wouldn't accept any interventions that others would consider life-saving. And it was through embarking in relationships with some of the people in that community that they came to trust us as listening to them and supporting them and advocating for them at every turn and asking them what it is that we can do for them to help them meet their life goals. It's always an honor to be asked into someone's home to support them at the most intimate time of their lives. And it's very important that we continue to do that. And so offering home birth services and offering people care where they want it, when they need it, is integral to an informed choice and culturally sensitive care model.
Thank you, Kim. I think that there's enormous benefit to the continuity care model that midwives have, as well as our fee structure. The continuity means that we're working in small groups. Care is provided by anywhere between 1 and 4 midwives in most cases, though there are some very innovative group and collaborative practices. And this means we really have a chance to build a relationship and build trust with our clients. The person you meet antenatally is the person who will be present at your birth. There are no strangers. That's very important to people, particularly in providing trauma-informed care. I can think of examples. I care for many Muslim birthers in my community. It's very important to them that there are no men involved in their care. And in a home birth situation, we can control the environment and ensure that they are receiving care from an all-female team, for example, if that's important to them. When I think of queer families, I've provided home birth for queer families where perhaps one of the parents is transgender and they're very concerned about the discrimination that they might face during the birth in the hospital. And a home birth has been a way to provide them with safe and respectful care where the correct pronouns are used and their family can really celebrate the birth without having to defend their human rights.
Thank you. So basically, what we're talking about in terms of that institutionalization of medicine, the colonialization of medicine as we know it, and as maybe someone like me would feel more comfortable, but certainly that doesn't cover what's required. Ms. Bacon, you had said that a lot of the services that you provide are not accepted in all jurisdictions. That speaks to that institutionalization. And maybe could you expand on what you meant by that?
So I think that while we do have Canadian midwifery competencies that are standardized and we do write a national exam, you do see small variations from jurisdiction to jurisdiction in the scope of practice. And that relates somewhat to regulations. And depending on the body that's involved in setting the midwifery regulations, there can certainly be politics and I would say gender discrimination, maybe some territorialism that's at play in determining who gets to provide what services. The great irony is that we have Canadians who have unmet needs for sexual and reproductive health care, whether that's trans-inclusive care, whether that's access to long-acting reversible contraception or to terminations. And yet at the same time, due to the somewhat siloed nature of care, we have conversations about protectionism, that one healthcare provider cannot steal a piece of the pie from another healthcare provider. So I think it's very important that we're breaking down silos and that we're providing care that's really based on family-centered care based on the needs of the individuals receiving it. And if we focus on that shared goal of meeting those needs, I believe we'll come to better solutions.
I know you're going to cut me off, Madam Chair, so I'll give you the rest of my time.
Oh, how wonderful. Then we'll go to Ms. Sahota for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'd like to thank the witnesses for being here today. My colleague, Ms. Shin, asked you about how COVID has impacted the practice of midwifery and whether there's been a change in the number of births since the pandemic happened. And Ms. Bacon, you had answered that, but I'm just wondering if Ms. Campbell has anything to add to that.
Well, I mentioned that it's also been exhausting for our teachers. So the midwives are so consumed with the extra work that goes into keeping safe, maintaining their safety, and ensuring the safety of the people that they're caring for and the colleagues that they work with and their families. I mean, there are midwives that aren't living at home because they feel it's unsafe to come into their home environment, so they're living in a segregated space so they can keep their family safe. It's just too much to take a student. So the impact of COVID on the education program has been devastating. We have I guess I can say this, we have concerns right now about the ability to provide enough placements for our second-year students at the University of British Columbia. And right now we're reconfiguring the way we're delivering our program so that we can meet the learning objectives, but we're being very creative in how we do it. And this is the first time we've had to do this, something like this.
Thank you. And did you have anything to add, Ms. Bacon?
I did want to add and build to say that the Midwives Association of BC has been conducting research on burnout in their population, and they've found that over COVID, the proportion of BC midwives who reported moderate to high work-related burnout increased from 45% in 2017 to 77% during COVID. And that's resulted in the proportion of midwives who've made plans to leave the profession more than double in the same time period. There are now 20% of midwives in British Columbia considering taking steps to leave the profession.
Can I add something to that?
Go ahead.
There are 25 vacancies called in Fraser Health for midwifery positions, and that has never happened, ever. We've lost 25 midwives in one community where there was 100.
You both spoke about, I think it was more Miss Bacon, she spoke about the C-sections being low in when there's midwife involved and hospitalization admissions being low. What are some of the contributing factors to that? Because that's quite interesting, actually.
Kim, do you want to take this one first? I know it's
You bet.
kind of your wheelhouse.
So it is my wheelhouse. That's the evidence-informed practice for midwifery care. We've got evidence that supports the fact that the role of the midwife contributes to several decrease in interventions, cesarean section being one of them. We think that it's the continuity of care. We think it's the relationships that we build and the trust and the comfort that people have when they're with someone they know. And it's quite simple. It lets their body do their work. And anxiety stops it. So when you create a soft landing spot and a safe place for people, the body does what it needs to do. Very simple. That's it.
I would also add that midwives picture birth as a normal life event. We do not pathologize birth, and we've learned the art of watchful waiting. You know, there's a cliche of midwives knitting in the corner, but it's for a very good reason, because if we're knitting, we're not intervening needlessly. And I think that that's a real unique midwifery skill set that contributes to the decreased cesarean rates, as well as time with our clients to make sure that they're really well informed and prepared for what to expect in the birthing process. And they have that continuous support in labor. We don't just sweep in at the end and catch a baby. We are with them from the onset of active labor until an hour or two after they birth. And that means sometimes that I might spend 14 hours straight with someone supporting them. And I believe it's that quality time that we spend one-on-one that makes the difference.
You just said that you can spend up to 14 hours with someone. Is there, do you come up with like specific solutions for the clients depending on their needs and accommodate them? Say that they're high risk. Does the care start earlier than others and end later as well? So how is that managed?
I can jump in a little bit. Yeah. So when we have a system of risk assessment, and we make sure that we individualize the care to meet the risk and the needs of the person. So we're always got our antenna up. We're always checking the environment. We're always situationally aware, and we pivot constantly.
Very good. Now we'll go to Ms. Sidhu for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, all the witnesses, being with us, and thank you for your testimony. My question is to Ms. Campbell. What is presently being done to support the retention of midwives across Canada?
Thank you very much for the opportunity to answer that. Not enough. We have an exodus of midwives from the profession, and it's hemorrhage. It's a hemorrhage of midwives from the profession. We're trying to negotiate systems changes. We have no flexibility, very little flexibility in how midwives can work. Some of the working teams are very requiring midwives to do team model care, call care. There's no way to use your competency and skills if you can't get up in the middle of the night, or you have a chronic care family member that you have to look after, or you've got some unique issue with your health. There's no half-time position sometimes for midwives to take. So the overhead, depending on how the model is funded, the overhead can be crippling, and it's not sustainable in many of the places in the country as it's run right now. We have significant issues.
How do you think the two level of government can better collaborate when it comes to this program, midwifery program? Do you have examples from other federated countries? You can speak, both of them can speak on that.
Alex, maybe you can speak to that with your ICM focus right now.
Absolutely. So I think that it's critical that we see a national, federal level midwifery office with a chief midwifery officer, whose role it would be to liaise with the ministers of health, advanced education, and education federally and across the provinces and territories to facilitate these sorts of conversations.
Ms. Bacon, you were talking about the impact of midwifery on rural communities. Are there any international policy approaches to midwifery that are better serving rural families?
I think actually that Canada, along with Australia, are really leading the way in terms of evidence looking at rural midwifery practice. What we haven't seen is the investments that follow the evidence. So we know that midwives are more likely to go to rural areas. They're more likely to stay in rural remote areas. And in terms of the percentage of people they can keep close to home for birth, midwives can maximize the percentage of people who can stay in their home community without having to travel out in comparison to other healthcare providers. So the evidence is there, and Canada and Australia lead in this evidence. You can look up the Rural Birthing Index, work by Jude Cornelson, but what we need to see is investments that follow that evidence. And particularly, this is going to look at salaried models of care, and expanded scope are going to be essential to this, because these areas have care that's low volume, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's low input. You can spend an incredible amount of time, particularly when the midwife is replacing the role of several healthcare providers. The midwife in a rural remote community may also be serving as an ultrasonographer. They may also be serving as the lab tech, drawing blood samples. They might be doing the infant hearing screening, the lactation consultant. So they're providing an enormous value, but we need to be investing, and we need to look at alternate models of care, as well as I mentioned, getting that Treasury Board distinction that would facilitate midwives to work in federal jurisdictions, because several of these, rural remote areas, such as on reserve, fall under that federal jurisdiction.
As a quick follow-up, Ms. Bacon, each year 40,000 women in Canada travel outside of their communities to give birth due to lack of services in rural Canada. How are different provinces across Canada addressing this gap?
I can say in BC, there's two provincially funded programs that are looking at trying to sustain rural obstetrical programs by providing mentorship, providing access to training that's closer to home, building their confidence and building their competence in providing emergency services. So they've individualized 8 communities in BC as part of their rural obstetrical program that's funded actually, unfortunately, through the Doctors of BC, but they've been very inclusive, including midwives and nurses in their training platforms. And we're hoping that actually increases capacity and impacts the communities to keep those providers there. it's difficult to stay in a community if you lose or if you start hemorrhaging. There's a critical mass, and if you take away one key player, the whole house of cards can fall down. So they're trying to build a system where people feel that they want to stay there because they feel well supported and well funded to do so.
Very good. Nous allons maintenant à Madame Larouche, 2,5.
Ms. Larouche. Thank you, Madam Chair, once again. And thank you, Ms. Campbell and Ms. Bacon, once again for your testimonies that are so enlightening. Ms. Bacon, I'd like to hear you now on the importance of Laurentian University for the education of Francophones outside of Quebec, as well as for the question of services available to women in rural versus urban settings. Could you please tell us a bit more about both?
Yes, very concerned about the closure of Laurentian University because of its extremely unique mandate. Laurentian University was the only bilingual midwifery education program in Canada and the only French language midwifery education program accessible to non-residents of Quebec. So its loss will be felt profoundly across the country in Francophone communities. It also happened to be the only northern university-based midwifery education program. And to be frank, rural care, remote care, northern care, these are specialty kinds of care. You can't fly just any midwife into a rural community and assume that they will have the very unique and expanded full scope skill set to be able to provide care in these areas. So very concerned to see that the northern specialty is lost, and particularly I am deeply saddened to hear the loss of the program that was the first in Canada to openly welcome Indigenous students. So many of Canada's Indigenous midwifery leaders were trained at Laurentian University. And that is because they openly welcomed and explicitly welcomed Indigenous students. And again, Indigenous care, as well as an educational program that's tailored to meet the needs of Indigenous students and to really set them up for success, is a key focus if we're going to meet our commitments to UN DRIP and TRC.
Very good. Now we'll go to Ms. Matheson for 2.5.
Thank you. I just wanted to use my final time. You've touched on it a bit, but we haven't heard a significant amount on your postpartum care and what that means to women and the services that are provided, the difference of care that provides.
I think you see Kim and I smiling because I think you've touched on what is perhaps the biggest selling feature of midwifery care. And so we look after birthers and their babies until approximately 6 weeks postpartum, or at least we're compensated in my jurisdiction to 6 weeks and care for them up to 12. And so there's that continuity of care in the first week postpartum. Those visits happen in the house. We do not expect you to pack yourself and your new baby into the car and drive to our office at 5 days postpartum, and we're coming the very next day. We will see you each day that you're in hospital, if you were in hospital until you're discharged, and your very first day after discharge, we're coming to you at home. And I can tell you, both as a midwife and as a mother, if you are hoping to breastfeed, it is not as easy as it looks. It's extremely difficult, and your success is dependent on receiving care early on. If I had to wait to day 5 postpartum, my son would not have been a fully breastfed or perhaps breastfed at all child. So I think that's a place where our care really shines. It's also where we really have an opportunity, I think, to impact families as a whole in terms of recognizing and responding, for example, to family-based violence or child neglect. We are very privileged to be able to enter people's homes, and it really deepens the trusting relationship, and it is one of the most beautiful and heartfelt parts of our work.
It is the favorite part of my job.
Well, I'll gift my 30 seconds. Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you to the witnesses.
Very generous tonight. Thank you. Well, I think we're going to leave it there because I have a couple of things that we have to clear up. I want to thank the witnesses for excellent testimony. Thank you. You've helped us with our study, and thank you for your service as well to all the women in the country. For the committee, I need to get approval for the budget to do this study. So $2,550 for all the headsets, et cetera, that we need for the study. Can I have approval from the committee for that? Very good. All right. Then the other thing is you need to have your dissenting reports for pay equity submitted in both languages by this Friday. And tomorrow, we will be completing our study on sexual misconduct within the Canadian Armed Forces. And then Thursday, we're going to start and hopefully finish the consideration of the unpaid report. So that's what's on our agenda. Don't forget, tomorrow is 11 to 1, and Thursday is 6:30 until 8:30. Very good. Is it the pleasure of the committee to adjourn? Seeing that it is, we adjourn, and I will see you tomorrow.